When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hey, for the audience, if you're just tuning in, we just hit the 30-minute mark on the podcast. So I just want to let you guys know what we're talking about. This is Mark Ledlow, the Fearless Mindset Podcast, and we got Pete Morton here with his organization. He has an organization that does nonprofit for Medicare support, medical support, CPR, stuff like that. You have two different companies, right, Pete?
Yeah. Well, I have my company, Morton Executive Decisions. We do consulting. Most of our clients are actually still nonprofits, humanitarian groups, work all over the world. So I spend a lot of time in Haiti and Ukraine and Afghanistan, different conflict zones. And then we have a nonprofit as well that raises support to provide medical IFACs, first aid kits, trauma care, that kind of stuff, the stuff that's needed and that can be taught to anybody. For these conflict zones, and as well as, and we keep everything separate. I don't go on trips where I'm doing business or nonprofit or business, and then we also do some free training. In Ukraine, we train about 400 people in how to do trauma, first aid, and also secure convoy operations. Because when these conflicts happen, the support goes to the military. And then a lot of guys get drafted, girls get drafted, and they get pulled into the military conflict. And the civilians are typically left to fend for themselves. I'm not saying that's the way it is in Israel. Israel has good infrastructure, but that's the way it was in Ukraine for sure. So we provided them with just the ability to stay alive. We saw the fruit of that. Thousands of people were able to be trained through these people that we trained, and lives. We saw lives saved. Kept getting videos of this baby got saved. They had arterial bleeding, and they're using the equipment you gave them.
Wow, that's cool.
So that's what we do on the other
Very
side.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so the audience, you're listening. We're discussing Israel. Pete's got an intel background from the military. He was an officer in the Army. Don't hold that against him. For the Marines out there listening, just joke it out there. But we're just talking about Israel. What we think is going to happen, and just how wise it is for IDF to hold back and go into Gaza Strip so we can make smart decisions. Not we, Israel can make smart decisions on behalf of their country, as a country and their sovereignty, and how they're going to handle Gaza, the Strip, the humanitarian issue. And we're going to probably dive a little deep into some issues that Pete was handling on the ground and what's going to happen with the battleship group in the Mediterranean and Lebanon, and you got Hezbollah up there and backed by Syria, and all these proxies. We'll get into a little bit on this second part of this episode. So that's why I wanted to bring Pete in, because I knew he was actively involved with stuff on the ground. He's got some good intel in Israel there versus listening to whatever network news you listen to here in the States and getting a twisted version of all this information. So that's why I want to bring Pete on so we can dump this episode here shortly, probably this week, and then just get some truth out there for the listeners who are just curious on what's really happening in Israel.
Yeah. And I can't tell you, I can see exactly what's going to happen with the United States involvement. I can tell you with Ukraine, I really wanted somebody just to kind of disrupt the cycle that we've gone through over and over again throughout history, where we support, and then the support runs out, and then the people are burned through, and there's nothing left to do but put boots on the ground. I was like, man, what if somebody just decided to go invade Moscow and hand over the reins to Zelensky or something, just to throw a wrench in that cycle and see what happens, It's a good thing I'm not in charge probably, but at the same time, we are following the same cycle where we'll stay out of it. We'll provide financial support.
Hey, Pete, did you hear about the cardiac arrest by Putin? He had like a heart attack and laid on the floor. Do you think that was propaganda?
Yeah,
I read that. I'm like,
it all is until
I read that. I'm like, that's such propaganda by Putin.
Well, but at the same time, it's like you look at our own president. Probably has some medical issues going on. Anybody who has an eye whether you are left or right,
You can
knows
tell
that.
there's some issues going
But
on.
of course, one side pushes, hey, he's in cognitive decline, he's senile, whatever, and then the other side's like, there's nothing wrong with this guy, he's making great decisions, blah 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 blah. And they're so extremely far away from each other. You're just like, none of you.
Is there any rationale with America anymore? Can you see what you see with your eyeball, or are you going to misinterpret it to however you vote? Come on, let's be real about it.
I personally listen to my 10-year-old. He seems to have a good grasp on reality. When he sees something and he tells me, he's like, there's something wrong with that guy, and he has no clue about politics, that's what I take as the truth now. But it's sad. People are really so extreme now. They can't find a common ground because they just want to be right.
True.
And they want to maintain control. And it's sad to see that. But so with Putin, he doesn't really, in my opinion, he doesn't really matter much. I don't think he's pulling all the strings, just like Joe Biden's not pulling all the strings here. Everybody wants to put all the blame on one leader, which makes no sense because we don't live in monarchies anymore.
True.
And even the monarchies in the world aren't run by a king.
That's true.
There's a collective of either politicians or business people behind the scenes or something that is pushing a lot of policy and decision making and stuff. So I kind of look at it that way. It's like, hey, even if Putin killed over tomorrow, who would step into his place? Would they worse? Would they continue on? Probably, in order to maintain the control that they have over their own country. So there's a lot of things in there. It's like, hey, one person, nothing hinges on one guy.
Sure.
World War II.
True.
And the eradication of the Jewish people did not hinge on Hitler by himself. He had a lot of help.
Yeah.
It's always, but everybody wants to make it simple in their minds. And it's hard to accept that there's a large group of people who might commit these kinds of atrocities together. That's terrifying to them.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? But now we're seeing it's out in the open now. I mean, the protests, the anti-Semitism we're seeing right now, at least the Germans were kind of like quiet about it and acted like nothing was going on. This is just out in front of you. Hey, gas, Jews, or it's just.
Well, I would never imagine I see all these major Ivy League colleges with these students doing what they're saying in protests. Like, are you kidding me? Really? And these institutions used to be private Christian colleges at one time.
Yeah, Harvard. And,
they were private Christian schools at one time, if you can believe that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I don't think it's the whole school. I have a lot of friends. I have friends who work at Harvard.
Yeah.
And, in some of these Ivy League schools, and it's the people who get the microphone, unfortunately, and they get attention. And like I said, it goes into the echo chamber, and then people grab onto it and spread it. I don't think the whole institutions are corrupt, but I do think they've allowed people to go a little bit too far in their speculation on certain things instead of teaching facts, and that they're reaping the benefits of that. I know my kids aren't. My son was like, hey, I want to go to a tech school. I was like, good. I'll pay for that.
Tech school.
It's going to save me a ton of money. I'm okay with the tech school. And I think more and more people are going that way because of the radicalization they're seeing. And it's not uncommon for universities to radicalize people. It happens all over the world. So I'm not surprised, but I am surprised at the open call and the violence that we're seeing on streets in Western countries. And I think that's an indicator for security professionals, especially,
absolutely,
to start considering that, accept the reality of the situation for what it is, and start, putting out your PIRs and figuring out how to mitigate the threat now. As it kind of gets, we're at the very beginning. This is an incursion that we saw in Israel. It's not a war. It's an incursion.
Interesting.
If a war kicks off, if a war kicks off, then you're going to see a bunch of, you're going to see people get spun up all over the world over it because there's a commonality on both sides of this around culture and religion that we haven't seen in a lot of these other conflicts. Ukraine, you don't see that. There's no cultural aspect of it. There's no religious aspect of it. It's just an evil dictator trying to take more land and expand their territory. Whereas with this one, it does have a cultural religious aspect to it. And both those cultures and religions are worldwide, global. So you will see events take place and happen as we're starting to see, people being attacked and on both sides, Muslim and Jews. But I've seen more from the information I'm gathering, we do a lot of web scraping and crawling. We're seeing more anti-Semitism than we are seeing or Islamophobia, whatever it's called.
My biggest concern right now is I know we have the battleship group in the Mediterranean, and we're supporting them with Israel munitions and equipment right now. And with Hezbollah being up north with Lebanon, I'm like, oh crap! They start launching stuff into Gaza. That's just going to open the door with the Iranian proxies, and we're going to have a different conversation on that. So I'm like, is Iran really going to do something stupid on this? What's your thinking with their proxies?
They don't have to do anything; they've already done it. So that's what I keep talking about. Is like, well, is Iran getting involved?
They're already involved.
It's always involved. Yeah. They're always funding this stuff. They don't have to get involved. They can do it through proxy. They've been doing it for years. Like I said, rockets into Israel is not something new. Rockets coming from Syria and Lebanon, even stuff happening from Jordan is not new. And so they've been involved. I don't think they're going to escalate it because they don't have the staying power themselves to do anything. If you look at Iran, they've never attacked the West. They've always attacked, Iraq or something. The only conflicts they've had where there's been force on force has been in the Middle East. Really, they've only done things through proxy. So I don't think they're going to change that now. The battle groups and the ships and stuff. I think that's more a show of support, and also for the footprint. We have a big footprint in the Middle East with bases that are getting attacked. Right in Iraq, we've had 20 soldiers supposedly got injured, and drone attacks that are happening and things like that. I think this is kind of like, hey, think twice before you start attacking American targets, and as well as showing support to Israel, who doesn't have the same kind of Navy that we have. It might be just kind of a deterrent, but I just can't see the current administration getting involved with boots on the ground outside of, special operations forces. I just can't see them because they haven't done anything in Ukraine when they could have.
Interesting.
They could have closed in Ukraine. I kept saying that at the beginning. It's like, dude, all we need to do is throw up a couple of predators, some drones, give them air superiority over the Russians, and this would probably be done pretty quickly. They never did. You put some SF boots on the ground. I know we don't want to waste any more blood and treasure, but it's going to happen. I keep telling everybody, like, especially on the right, my front right, we shouldn't be involved in Ukraine. It's like, we are, and we're going to be. And the longer we wait to get into this, but my idea of it wasn't dragging it out forever by just funneling money into Ukraine. It was, let's get this over with a little bit quicker. Russia's got an economy the size of Italy's. It shouldn't take that much. But that has changed, of course. Now Russia's wooing, China, and China's overtly supporting him, which was my red line, honestly, for World War III. And the problem with people right now is they have a hard time grasping the reality of the situation because they don't want to. It's scary, but eventually they'll have to, as people in Israel are finding out, as the Ukrainians have already found out, as people in Taiwan are preparing for. This stuff is happening. It is going to happen. We're going to be involved somehow or another. What does that look like, So
I think you got a good point. What we saw, how Biden handled Ukraine is how he's going to handle Israel.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what that looks like. I do know it's going to be interesting to see because typically the left has supported the occupied areas more than Israel. And so, of course, him being on the left with his left-leaning cabinet and wondering if they do go into Gaza and start, people start dying and stuff and what that's going to look like on their side. I just can't see them putting troops on the ground to support Israel when they're at the same time telling everybody to cease fire and not commit genocide. So, and then the Republican side of things, they're just in disarray and a complete mess.
Ain't that a truth? It's like, really?
It's just sad to see. It's like, look, you guys can't come together on anything. You can't do anything within your own organization. So I don't anticipate they'll be able to have much of a say-so in it as well. But we will see, typically when these things start, we haven't reached Pearl Harbor yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
The UK and France in World War II, suffered for many years and had horrific things go on in their cities leveled before we ever even got involved. And it took, Pearl Harbor to do that. I'm hoping it doesn't. Like I said, it'd be nice if somebody could throw a wrench in this cycle, which is just playing out again, just in different countries with different leaders, at different times. To either get it done quick or just, I guess we're going to completely stay out of it, but I don't think that's even feasible. You can't stay out of it 100%.
Yeah, I think you're right. We got to, like you said, that battleship group in the Mediterranean right now is a PR stand, is all that is. Hey, world, we're here. Take your pictures, take your videos for your news networks, and we're here. We're doing stuff with Israel. We're supporting them, and from any more missile launches from Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever else, the Houthis.
Well, I hope we don't get involved when we don't need to. I mean, like I said, Israel is fully capable of handling this. They just need support. What they need right now is people just say, hey, I'm sorry that this happened. I'm here for you. We love you. Just like people did for us during 9/11. We had a lot of support globally. People reached out, and I remember I was only 4 months into the Army. I was a private. I was E2. And I was in airborne school when that happened. And we had a lot of foreign officers on base at Fort Benning, and we had a lot of we had a couple of foreign enlisted soldiers who had joined, to get citizenship, and they were more hurt by it than, from what I could tell, than most of my fellow Native Americans, I guess what you call this at that point. I don't know what you want to call it. Americans who had been in the country for a long time, but or born here. But it was like they felt that, and they offered support, and that's what we needed. That's what Israel needs right now. They don't need people going around and just automatically, without knowing the truth, bashing the situation. It's horrible on both sides for everybody. For my Arabic friends, for my Muslim friends, for my Jewish friends, anybody in that country right now is hurting because of loss. And anybody who's experienced loss should understand that, And so I think that's shaped my view on a lot of things. My middle son had passed away back in 2011, and I think that loss just kind of shaped the way I view these situations. You try and look at it from the individual's perspective of loss, regardless of what their belief system is, or their political beliefs, or their culture, or even if they're part of a nefarious organization, or a terrorist organization. People feel lost, and it changes things. And you got to look at it from that perspective, and it kind of levels it out a little bit. The idea of thinking of people groups as it's acceptable to have losses in a people group. It's acceptable because they did this to me, but we should be able to kill this many of theirs. That's disgusting. I don't know when we got to that point as a country or as the Western world. But the people that are thinking like that should be ashamed of themselves. I mean, it's just, or they need to go on a freaking field trip to a developing nation somewhere. I mean, get out of the country and experience some hardship, for crying out loud. If you think of people numbers like that, or there's acceptable losses somehow, there's something wrong.
Absolutely. And you had a firsthand account. You've experienced that with some of your operations that you guys were conducting in Israel. That had not. It's just share with the audience on what you kind of experienced in the last few weeks.
Well, I don't generalize it because I can't talk specifics. But we had someone reach out to us for help with a hostage, and I don't want to say who pushed the mark direction, but pretty close. And we were trying to find this person. The government didn't know, and they disappeared between the time of the festival and going home. So there was a pretty good, and the middle-aged woman, mother, and they just didn't know. So we reached out to our government contacts. They didn't know, and we started reaching out and created some web scrapers and crawlers to kind of go through the social media feeds and stuff, look at videos, and we ended up finding out that she had been killed and deceased, and the government hadn't reached out yet, or hadn't been able to reach out yet, or something got confused, lost in translation, and we ended up doing a death notification. I hate doing that. I've done it before in the military. I've had to do it in our industry, but it's not part of my job, and I hate doing it. But it does bring it around to the family and their loss. When I do kidnap and ransoms, having to work closely with a father who's negotiating the release of a daughter, or a husband who's negotiating the release of a wife, really brings it around and makes it a little bit more personal and makes you think about that loss. What it would feel like if it was your son or your daughter or your wife, or your mom or dad, whatever, brother, sister. And it changes the view on the value of human life. It still makes me want to be a better protector. It makes me want to do better. Right. I have a red line. If I ever have to take a life, it's to protect innocence. But guess what? I will take a life if it's to protect innocence, if somebody's trying to take that innocence somehow. At the same time, I don't devalue a people group, no matter who they are, with color of their skin, their religious beliefs, or any of that, to the point where I think that there's somehow an acceptable loss. Trying to put myself in their position and feel the pain that they're feeling, no matter what their background is. And it makes it easier to look at situations without so much bias. And so I think it's important for people to do that. But I'll tell you, my kid, he's 16. Or almost 16. He will start traveling when he's 17, and it's not going to be to total nice places. Luckily, I'm his dad. I can make sure he's safe, but we're going to some developing nations so he can experience some of that himself and have a better view on life than what I feel like is the majority of these people in the Western world. It's not your developing nation countries. They live day to day in survival mode. They understand loss.
Yeah.
It shapes their mind as well sometimes. And sometimes it makes life cheap in those locations. But for us to bring that here after being blessed and having great security and all this financial wealth and everything else, to go out there and try and cheapen life to people groups, I don't get it. It's sad. Yeah, but I hope we put a wrench in that cycle somehow.
I think you're right, Pete. When I was in the Marine Corps, we did a mission operation in Nicaragua. I think it was back in 1998 or something like that. And when they had big flooding, wiped out villages and stuff, and we were out there for about a month for our summer mission op that we had to do. And they coming back home, seeing how those folks lived and how hard they worked and how little they had and what conditions they lived in. I was like culture shock.
You feel like you're coming back to a simulation. You're crossing over back into the matrix when you come home to the developed world.
I felt disgusted. I felt like, wow, what class did I miss going through college and the military boot camp? What did I miss? I'd never been exposed to that, growing up in the United States of America and going to that third world country, coming back to the States. I'm like, oh my gosh, Mark, you're such a lazy piece of whatever. Because I felt so guilty. And I had this guilt that came over me from seeing how those folks lived in a third world country, but they were so happy. But you see the hole where they did their thing at. And they had their clothes hung up on lines where they were drying them out, and they had one article of clothing is all they had. And they had tortillas they ate, and I'm like, how do they live like this? But that's their reality. Yeah. And it hit me pretty hard.
You're a little bit more grateful for those things that you have. And, what's funny is you look at veterans and a lot of the problems they have with PTS and suicide and stuff. I always tell people, it's like, I don't think that's actually just from the war. I think some people are predisposed to not be able to deal with that stuff. I've never had nightmares about war. I've seen a lot of it. And I've never had any bad feelings about anything I did in war. Or even the friends I've lost in war, I always respected their sacrifice. It was coming home that I had a hard time with and trying to plug back into society without having a real purpose and without having that reality check, I think, or watching other people walk around with that. And I don't want people to think that I'm telling them, hey, you live a perfect life and nothing bad ever happens to you. That's not true. Bad stuff happens to people all the time around the world, including the United States. But it was the people that took advantage of that and just didn't realize what they had. And I had a hard time dealing with that. And I think a lot of vets have a hard time with that. You experience the real world in combat. Oh. You come home back here and you don't get that feeling of purpose and direction and that you're making a difference anymore and that you're just kind of wasting away in this simulation.
Yeah.
And so, to coin a term, sorry, but I do think the Matrix is real now. I'm pretty convinced. those guys knew what they're talking about when they wrote that.
That does make sense. Why they had that mental shift when they get home. They just feel inadequate because what they've seen, and they come back to the country, back to normality. They go, this just isn't right. They don't fit. They don't fit in. It doesn't feel normal. Exactly.
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize you're meant to have adventure. You're meant to take risks. There's things that are built into our DNA that we're supposed to do, and if you don't have that opportunity, once you take an extreme risk, have an extreme adventure, it's like you peaked, right? It's hard to have things measure up. But anyway, sorry, tangent. Went down a different direction from Israel.
That's okay. I got to give you a shout out for you have a ministry too that you do, right?
That's the nonprofit. It's Iron Edge Ministries. So Iron Edge Sharp or IronEdgeMinistries.com. If anybody ever wants to, we're still taking donations. We're not moving fast though. Like I said, we're taking a step back and we're waiting because we don't think it's going to be fast to see what the needs are. A lot of people rush. They raise a lot of money off the crisis. I'm on the ground. There's a picture the other day of a reporter in a vest with a helmet. And the guy was taking a picture behind her cameraman who had a hat on and just a shirt. Like, a lot of people go over and like, I'm going to raise money off this. They raise a bunch of money. Then they try and get rid of it, and they're not really providing support. They're just funding their organization. We don't do that. We don't get any money. All of it's voluntary. The money goes directly to whoever we support, however we support them. But we are going to be looking for that opportunity, and whether it's through us or through a partner organization. The other thing I don't like to take away from is Israel they can do their thing. They're fully capable of supporting themselves and providing support, humanitarian aid. If we can find a government or an Israeli nonprofit on the ground that we want, and we know a couple that we can support, then we'll just funnel those funds to them and be happy that we can help support them somehow. So, but yeah, that's and then my company, of course, we support nonprofits all over the world as a commercial organization. If you need help getting in and out, right now, Lebanon is a big one. We have assets that we can help with there if you need to get people out, if you're concerned. Same thing with Egypt, Jordan, the surrounding countries in the Middle East. But my company is predictprotection.com. So please feel free to reach out to me there.
And subscribe to Pete on LinkedIn. He does some really cool updated risk white papers that he does, and subscribe to his newsletter as well. We're connected on LinkedIn. He does a lot of great things in the industry that people really don't see or know unless you really watch them for him. But he's definitely an industry leader, and I love Pete's heart for serving others, and especially the ministry side of Pete that he does with some big players that he didn't mention that are involved as well. And shout out to his heart for, serving to the Lord and servant to Christ from a Christian perspective. I won't deny my faith. And, I know Pete has a belief as well, and many people that he knows that are in that ministry side that are also believers. So there's a few of us out there, and that's why we believe what we believe.
You can't deny the evil out in the world, so hopefully there's something good.
It's showing its ugly head the last few weeks in Israel, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But with that said, folks, this is sponsored by Ledlow Security Group, and I just wanted to have this chat with Pete to just kind of get a sense of reality of what's going on in Israel. Is there going to be a world war? And I think Pete broke it down to us as more than likely probably not, because it's past behavior predicts future behavior always. That's historical. And I don't, everybody's getting all wound up and they're getting all stressed out about a world war and the access of that's all the news propaganda. And Pete, I think, explained it perfectly in this podcast that it's going to be more of the same. How Biden handles this with the battleship group is going to probably be the same way he did with Ukraine. And I don't think we're getting into a world war, although the media would like you to believe that for the industrial war complex.
Well, real quick, if I can add one thing on there.
Sure.
We're already in a world war. It's just not being labeled like that. So just think of it that way. Instead of worrying about getting into a world war, there's wars going on multiple fronts in large countries that are developed. That's a world war. But I think the best thing we do, especially as security professionals, we are going to have a huge hand in ensuring this doesn't escalate further. The more people we can keep safe, the more people we can help avoid crisis, the more we can protect our assets here in the United States to keep them from being falling victim to a catastrophic attack like we saw in 9/11, or Pearl Harbor, the less chance we have of getting pulled into something that's big, and global. And so I think, if something like that happens, we have to respond. The government will respond. But if we can, it does boil down to us, the guys on the ground, the eyes and ears on the ground in law enforcement, in the military, in private security. The more we can do now to mitigate that, the better off we're going to be, I think, in the long run. So,
was a positive wrap up there, folks. But yeah, thanks Pete for his time, for coming on the show. I know he's running multiple operations on the ground everywhere, and his time is money. But I just want to, for the folks listening, just to have him on the show, just to break this all down and make it all sense to everybody. So live on faith and not on fear.
Exactly.
Thanks, got Mark. It, Pete. And thanks for tuning in, folks. You can find us on all the podcast platforms. Give us a good rating and follow us on YouTube and subscribe on YouTube. And we'll catch you on the next show and episode. Thanks for tuning in, folks, and we'll catch you on the next show.